We all know the feeling of staring at a bright screen on a slow Tuesday, waiting for the clock to run out. But the mundane boredom of a modern desk job is a massive luxury. Imagine scrolling through an ancient job board. You wouldn't be weighing dental plans against commute times. You would be trading your physical safety, your dignity, and sometimes your actual soul just to survive. Before engineering and automation built the conveniences we rely on today, getting a message across the country or checking your health didn't happen with microchips. Every single task was powered by human bodies taking on brutal, deeply uncomfortable work. Look at these steep, jagged stone steps high in the Andes Mountains. If an Incan king wanted to send a message across his territory, he didn't have horses, and his people didn't use a written alphabet. He used an entirely human communication network. The king relied on highly fit runners called chasquis. To deliver a verbal order, these messengers sprinted up to 5 miles at a time across wobbling, uneven stone roads, breathing thin air 10,000 feet above sea level. This image shows a quipu. Since the Inca didn't write words down, runners memorized the verbal message and carried these tied knots of string. The knots allowed them to precisely track large numerical data, like troop counts or tax records, as they ran. The ability to govern a massive, continent-spanning society rested entirely on the leg muscles and sharp memories of a dedicated workforce running uphill in the freezing cold. Now let's look at the open ocean during the Age of Sail. Naval battles involved giant wooden ships blasting heavy metal balls at each other, creating a chaotic environment of thick smoke and flying wooden splinters. To keep the ship's cannons firing, crews needed people to carry heavy leather bags of gunpowder from the storage hold deep inside the ship, all the way up to the deck. Because the stairwells were tight and speed was critical, this job went to highly agile young boys. In the 18th and 19th centuries, rampant poverty and disease left thousands of children in overcrowded orphanages. European and American navies swept up these desperate kids, some as young as 7 years old, and dropped them directly into active war zones. In exchange for dodging rogue cannon fire and watching the adult crew members get blown apart, these kids received basic clothing, a hammock to sleep in, and daily meals. Navies only stopped relying on children to power their weapons in the mid-1800s, when strict child labor laws were passed, and modern artillery designs made the role unnecessary. If you were entirely out of money in 17th century Britain, you might take on an incredibly strange on-call gig known as the Sin Eater. This role was reserved entirely for the poorest, most outcasted members of society. When a local resident passed away, the grieving family placed stale bread and warm beer directly on the deceased person's chest. Your job was to walk into the room, eat that specific food, and literally absorb all the bad deeds that person committed in life. The catch was, the community believed you permanently retained those absorbed sins. Because you were carrying the spiritual trash of everyone in town, your neighbors hated and avoided you. You lived in complete isolation. You gave up any chance of a normal social life and ruined your own spiritual standing, all for a few pennies and a free, highly questionable dinner. Medical diagnostics also used to be a highly physical, deeply unpleasant task. Physicians checked your health by closely examining your urine. This chart is a medieval uroscopy guide. It shows 20 distinct shades of liquid arranged in a circle. Doctors held a fresh sample up to the light to match the color on the page. To confirm their findings, they would frequently smell and even taste the liquid. They based this practice on the theory of the 4 humors. They believed the human body was controlled by a delicate balance of blood, phlegm, and bile. Any sickness meant those fluids were out of balance, and that imbalance would show up directly in the waste. Surprisingly, doctors successfully identified certain conditions with this method. If a sample tasted distinctively sweet, they knew the patient had what we now call diabetes. The tragic part is that after a doctor correctly identified your illness by sipping your sample, medieval medicine had almost no real treatments to offer. The incredibly gross diagnosis was accurate, but totally useless. Over in the 1700s, the ultra-wealthy estate owners of England, Ireland, and Scotland had vast amounts of land and intense boredom. They designed massive landscapes to look like perfect, serene slices of nature. To make these gardens feel more mystical, some owners hired a live human being to serve as an ornamental garden hermit. The contract required a man to live inside a custom-built artificial cave for up to 7 years without ever taking a bath, cutting his hair, or trimming his nails. The worker was forbidden from speaking to any of the wealthy guests strolling through the garden. He was effectively a human zoo exhibit, a rugged, living prop meant to give rich visitors a fun philosophical thrill. While the vast majority of the population struggled through grueling manual labor just to survive, the absolute richest members of society were spending small fortunes to purchase unwashed men to use as yard decorations. Our core human needs haven't actually shifted. We still demand instant communication, precise medical diagnostics, and ways to show off our success. We just use better tools now. Over the centuries, human ingenuity successfully outsourced our most degrading and dangerous tasks. We built cell towers to replace mountain sprinters, chemical tests to replace human taste buds, and mass-produced lawn gnomes to replace hired cave dwellers. A quiet afternoon staring at a spreadsheet can certainly feel mind-numbing, but the environment is safe, dry, and clean. So the next time your shift drags on a little too long, be thankful your job description doesn't involve drinking medieval medical samples or dodging naval artillery. Let me know the worst job you've ever had in the comments below, and thanks for watching.